So I wanted to, first of all, my official job here is really to give the welcome and to make sure that we, we sort of start the day off just with some of the big thinking. I'm lucky because then I'll be followed by the many people today that will provide all the detail that you want, that you came here for. But I wanted to start the morning, and take just a little bit of time to think about what we're, some of what we're doing, some of why we're doing it, and then do a little bit of what I think sometimes is my piece, which is really focusing on the idea of alignment and integration with the work that we do. So Cindy will give you more detail, Teresa will give you more detail, our staff will give you more detail on some of the initiatives. But I thought, how better to start than one of the things that I think gives me perspective, but continues, a little bit of a revelation sometimes. So I thought, let's start with a story. Let's start with a story about, some of the people that we are intending to serve, some of the things we're trying to do. We have some of those, some of the data that we have will say that this woman, Minerva, this mom, this young, new to be excited mom, who is a teen mom, is at high risk because she had her first child very young. She actually dropped out of high school because her mother got sick. And she went to her guidance counselor and asked her counselor, how can I finish school? I need to take some time to take care of my mom. And he said, you've got two options. You either stay in school or you take care of your mom. And she said, well, if those are my only options, then you made it easy. And she dropped out. Her husband was a recent immigrant, does no immigration status at the time, had some college education, but in Mexico, was working as a busboy at the time, and didn't speak English. She did. So when you think about that baby, we're talking about high risk because of lack of English, because of immigration status, a mixed status family. You're talking about a mother who didn't complete high school, and we know what that can mean. You're talking about a very low income family. She stopped working while she was pregnant, and he was working, the bussing tables, trying to learn. And when you take all of, sort of the totality of these circumstances, and you apply the research to what kind of outcomes this family will likely have, we know it doesn't look good. But there's a lot that can help overcome those types of things. We know one of the biggest pieces, right, is family. It's the close relationships. It's the services that we're providing. So the sort of, as you follow this story, public school, Harvard University, law school, assistant superintendency, right? Like I'm very proud to say that by doing the right things, by doing things that didn't always seem to make sense, my mom was able to get the kind of outcomes that we're hoping to get for our kids out of this story, right? My aunt would tell her, oh, Minerva, you're crazy. You're talking to your stomach like it's a person. And she said, it is a person. She's like, but you're talking to her like she's an adult. And she's like, she's a person too, And as I was a baby, they would say, why are you talking to her so much? You look crazy. Who knows why? She didn't have the kind of services that would tell her, talk to your baby, read to your baby, right? She may not be old enough to read herself, but she's old enough to learn, even in the womb. She would speak to me in English and Spanish. It's what we would tell our families today with the kind of programs and services that we have. But for some reason, she had the instinct, she had the guidance, she had the culture. We don't want to rely on luck of that kind of instinct. We want to make sure that our families have access to the information that will get them to where they need to be, because we can make the kind of outcomes. And it's a continuum. It doesn't stop where we stop, right? In order to make that story happen, there has to be a strong public education system. There has to be a strong system of guidance to make sure that families, our highest need families, are directed towards opportunities and options, that there are high expectations. From the day the earliest day I can remember, the question was never if you go to college, but when you go to college, when you become a lawyer, when you go to Harvard. Turns out when I was a junior in high school, she goes, so where is Harvard? It's in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We can't, it's kind of far, isn't it? We probably couldn't drive there in a day. I'm like, no, probably not. She's like, well, maybe there's a closer college that's really good. I said, nope, you said Harvard, it's Harvard. But those are the stories. And I just wanted to start there because I really do think that that's where, that's why we're in this room, right? But then we get boggled down in all of the detail and everything else. So, you know, with that, yesterday, those of you who joined us, and I'm so glad to have seen so many of you last night, we were talking a little bit about the vision of early childhood. And, you know, this is a little snippet, it's a little piece, but Teresa will likely, you know, speak a little bit more about this sort of thing. One of the things that we're looking to do in our system, and, you know, it's a system of systems, is try to make sure that each and every child enters kindergarten safe, healthy, ready to succeed, and eager to learn. You know, this is not just the highest need, it's not just the kids we're serving, but it's each and every child. And one of the things that we really want to emphasize and push is this is all of our mission. So if you're in a program and the neighboring program, whether it's a Head Start or childcare or whatever it is serving different kids, your mission is still that those kids also enter eager and ready to learn, right? How do we get to a place where we're not just focusing on our enrolled population, but we're thinking about our community. We're thinking about the kids at the other program. We're thinking about what resources, you know, maybe there could be a partnership between our pre-K and the 3 home visiting, the 3 family-based providers that we know are in our neighborhood that feed into our program or feed into our kindergarten. You know, how do we move to that place where we are thinking about everyone? And then one of our strategic emphasis as we think about our state resources is making sure that we emphasize increasing access to highly intensive and effective services for the most at-risk children, those with multiple high needs characteristics. Right? So we know that our system can't serve everyone. We would love to provide everything to everyone because, you know, they're all, how do you choose who gets services? But we have to do that because we know we have limited slots, limited capacity. So we really want to make sure that we're targeting kids, but also making sure that the services we provide are effective. We know that our preschool programs are phenomenal in Illinois. We have an incredibly robust program. As we see federal competitions to raise quality across the states, many of those criteria came from Illinois. Many of those were built on sort of the way we approach preschool. But we also know that our program is funded at 2.5 hours a day. You know, some of you are providing more because you're cobbling together resources. We know that we don't have the same level of wraparound services that some of our sister programs may have around health, mental health, and other pieces, unless you're able to build those partnerships and really build something that's even more robust than what we require. And so how we make sure that what we provide is effective, it meets the family's needs, whether or not it's in your grant criteria, whether or not it's required by federal law or by rule or anything else. How do we really try to get kids what they need, get kids and families what they need? And when we think about what we're doing and our vision, this is a little piece of it, but our vision for kids isn't just that they arrive at school ready. We have this bigger vision that they be successful in career, in college, in life. We want to make sure that they have strong social emotional development throughout the continuum. We don't just want strong social emotional development until they hit 5, right? And then we go, no, it doesn't matter. You know, and unfortunately, that's not always a shared vision. And so part of the question as we talk about alignment and integration is how do we trickle up some of what we know are really good practices that are also part of getting to this college and career readiness vision about ensuring that students make progress each year and graduate from school prepared to succeed in school and at work and build a strong future for themselves and the country. Is that our mission too? Is that our vision too? I'd say absolutely. Who doesn't want that once they get just a little bit taller than when they leave our rooms, right? When they leave our doors. And so we are part of this pipeline. And it's a pipeline that's not only a K-12 system, it's a child care system, it's a juvenile justice system, it's a mental health system, it's a health system, right? It's all of those other pieces that we connect to one way or another, whether we are intentional about it or not. So let's be intentional about it. One of the things that I think, as we're thinking about why we do things, this is actually a slide that I've shared when I talk about the work that the center that I work for within ISBE does. Because I couldn't be more proud of working and overseeing a center that addresses English learners, it addresses early childhood, and it addresses family and community engagement. I mean, that is just so exciting for me. And one of the reasons why that's so exciting for me is because I think there's a unified vision there, and it's equity. It's making sure that at the end of the day, we're able to help build the robustness that's needed to really try to give every child the opportunities that are necessary to be successful. We want the same thing for all kids. Healthy, happy, ready to learn. But we know that not all kids and families can get there on their own. And so for me, early childhood services help to mitigate, the kinds of effects that may exist within, that child's context at home and in the community. But that's not it. That can't do it alone. For English learners, our services also help to mitigate some of those factors. And our family and community engagement. Who knows better than early childhood how important family and community engagement is to addressing those factors that we tend to call high-risk factors, right? Those factors that we're looking at to determine eligibility and things like that, whether it's poverty, community violence, housing, access to food, nutrition, mental health, all those other things. So I think that one of the things that we're doing, and one of the ways of framing the conversation, when we sit down and meet with principals, superintendents, have a conversation about how our program is part of them being able to accomplish their mission. If you're focused on third grade, ELA, and math, you need a child that comes to school ready, you need a family that arrives ready, you need a child who's able to sit down, pay attention, work with their peers, collaborate, hear someone. Common Core wants to make sure that students are able to hear someone who has an opposing point of view related to a text, for example, and respond proactively in dialogue. Well, that's not something that just happens when you have high reading skills, right? This isn't just about literacy. It's about whole child development, and that is part of what we're trying to do. So you'll hear Cindy talk a little bit more about the idea of birth to grade 3 alignment and some of the pieces that we need to play here. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. Kindergarten is this funny little juncture where some things feel like early childhood and some things feel like K-12. And then there are some places where kindergarten is very unique. And the early childhood system butts up against kindergarten, or kindergarten butts up against the sort of the later parts of the 1 to 12 system. What we really want to do is make sure that our families don't feel any of that. We want to make sure that the children don't feel any of that we're taking the steps to align programs, services, professional development, accountability systems, all those different pieces that are going to help create that bridge and create what is an experience, because our children will only have one lifetime experience. They will touch many of us along that pathway, but we want to make sure that we're able to bring that together. So our approach within the center that I work in is having targeted strategies and having integrated strategies. The targeted in early childhood are all those things that say early, right? The early childhood data system, the early learning initiative, the preschool program, all of the services that we provide in this room and our colleagues provide in Head Start and childcare. But then we also need to make sure that we're integrated into other systems, that the touch points are there, the connections are there. Make sure that when we're talking to other systems, whether it's the folks that have a grant for mental health and we have a grant for preschool, well, what are the touch points when we want to make sure that our children and our families have access to mental health, that our providers have access to mental health services, because the work we do isn't easy, right? So how is it that we make those connections? When I talk to K-12 folks, I use this framework of the 8 essential elements for school improvement, because it really captures all elements of schools, whether it starts with planning, leadership, professional development, curriculum, instruction. And essentially we say there are touch points for all parts of early childhood in all of those systems. So if you have a district-wide professional development day and you have a program that's embedded within a system, is that professional development addressing the early part of the continuum? Is it addressing developmentally appropriate practice? Is it connecting Common Core, which everyone is being trained on, to the early learning standards, right? How are we making those touch points and those connections? And on our end, I think we really need to be thinking about how we foster these connections upward. When we talk about things like family and community engagement, one of the efforts that we're playing right now at the state board is really trying to make those connections and grow out what we do in the K-12 system to serve our families. You know, I've heard over and over from the early childhood world, oh my gosh, you know, we do such a good job with our families, and it's scary to let go of our families and sort of send them off into a school and not know whether or not they're going to be brought in, whether or not they're going to be received, right? I hear the same thing about things like social emotional development. Well, we do a really good job with that, but then don't know what happens once we hit kindergarten. Developmentally appropriate practice, same thing. Well, what are we doing about building those connections and making sure that the transitions are smooth for our kids as they make their way up? So, you know, I started with family and I'm ending with things like family. This is one of those types of areas, but it cuts across everything, where we really need to think about the partnership. Not this is our way and that's their way. And we may disagree with their way, but we'll do things in our, you know, in our universe, our way, and then kind of push our families off and see what happens. We really need to be part of professional learning communities and educational communities and development communities that cut across the continuum. Not only talking to each other, hey, we collaborate, we talk to Head Start, we talk to childcare, but also collaborating upwards. You know, having teachers come and do visits in the classrooms, going to visit the classrooms they're going to, trying to figure out how can our parent coordinator maybe provide some PD to the school's, you know, person who gets a stipend, and on top of everything else they have to do, they coordinate parents. You go, well, you know, maybe we can support each other so that we can figure out how we can strengthen those areas that we do see, you know, need a lot of work. And at the same time, how do we learn a little bit more, and we do this every day, about data systems, about different ways of addressing accountability, not being afraid of accountability, not being afraid of measurement, but making sure that it's appropriate for our settings and that it really fits where our kids are and what we're trying to accomplish and do. So with that, I will leave you and make room now for Teresa Hawley, which I think it's always such a treat to have to hear from Teresa in this kind of setting, because we spend so much time in meetings together, you know, sort of drilling down on the nitty-gritty. But I think we are very lucky to have a state, and it's not just luck, right? We really built this idea of having a governor's office of early childhood development that would help us connect the dots, that would help us think across systems, that would bring vision and coordination and support as a whole system, to think about each and every child. And there's no better embodiment of that than Teresa Hawley, because she really has been a phenomenal to work with, and a leader and a visionary, and someone who does things on, you know, does these little couple-year projects like building educare centers and things like that, right? So she knows a thing or two about really trying to deliver the quality we're looking for in kids. So with that, I will hand things off to Teresa Hawley. Thank you.